Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to start by associating myself with the view that's been expressed by both you and Ranking Member Hatch that short-term tax extensions are not the way we ought to conduct tax policy. The extension of expiring tax provisions we're going to consider today, while necessary, doesn't give individuals and businesses the certainty that they need to plan, nor does it help our economy grow at its full potential. What we need is comprehensive tax reform, and so I'm especially pleased that the modified mark we're considering today includes my amendment with Senators Portman, Roberts, and Burr, expressing the sense of the committee that a comprehensive tax reform should commence next Congress, that tax reform should resolve the issue of tax extenders, that a major focus of tax reform should be economic growth and lowering rates by broadening the tax base, and that the chairman and the ranking member of this committee should consult with the chairman and ranking member of the budget committee to ensure that an appropriate baseline is used during tax reform. This provision puts the committee on record for the position that not only is tax reform necessary and urgent, but that we should use tax reform as an opportunity to get rid of tax extenders entirely. If something is good tax policy, then let's, and it encourages economic growth, then let's make it permanent. And if it doesn't, then let's allow it to expire. And I want to say, Mr. Chairman, as well, that I'm pleased that the bill before us today extends for 2 years the deduction for state and local sales taxes. Senator Cantwell and I have filed an amendment to make this treatment permanent, to put non-income tax states like ours on a level playing field with the rest of the country. This is the right policy, and it's something we intend to continue to pursue. And finally, I am pleased that the legislation today includes a 2-year extension of the wind production tax credit. I have an amendment later that speaks to how we move forward on that issue, but I appreciate your leadership, Mr. Chairman, and that of Ranking Member Hatch, and thank you for working together to make today's markup possible.
Thank you, Senator Thune.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to call up Thune Amendment number 3, which is Committee Amendment number 76. And just to speak to this issue, the amendment would incorporate into the bill before us the Internet Tax Freedom Forever Act, which is legislation that is sponsored by you, Mr. Chairman, me, and 35 other senators, including Senators Roberts, Burr, Isaacson, and Grassley on this committee. And essentially what it would do is make permanent the existing moratorium on state and local taxes on Internet access, as well as multiple and discriminatory taxes on Internet commerce. I don't intend to ask for a vote on this, but I'm raising it because I believe it's a critically important issue and an issue that we need to address very soon. And the reason for that is that the existing tax moratorium, known as the Internet Tax Freedom Act, or ITFA, is due to expire in 7 months on November 1st of this year. First enacted in 1998, this moratorium has been extended 3 times with broad bipartisan support, most recently in 2007, when it was extended for 7 years. Keeping consumer access to the Internet free from taxation promotes use of the Internet as a critical gateway to jobs, education, healthcare, and entrepreneurial opportunities. And as ranking member of the Commerce Committee, one of my top priorities, along with the senator from West Virginia, is expanding high-speed Internet access to rural America, a goal that will be impeded if ITFA expires and consumers are burdened with new taxes on their Internet service. So because this has been such long-standing policy, if it expires, the vast majority of Americans with Internet service would likely see new taxes imposed on their Internet access for the very first time. That's because there are states that, with laws in place, which if the federal moratorium would expire, some of those taxes would kick in. So that's why I think we need to move on this extension as soon as possible. Consumers are likely to begin to hear about the possibility of their Internet access becoming subject to tax in late summer. And that's why I think we need to take action before the August recess to provide certainty both to providers as well as to consumers. And I think there are other what I would call consumer-friendly legislation bills that we need to advance as well. One being Digital Goods and Services Tax Fairness Act that you and I, Mr. Chairman, have introduced, which would set the rules of the road for taxing digital downloads and digital services. So I just, as you know, that's also a piece of legislation that's been referred to this committee. So I want to work with you, with our colleagues here on the committee, to make it permanent as soon as possible. And I want to raise that issue here, as I said, knowing full well it perhaps won't be included in this particular piece of legislation. And I know my colleague from Wyoming who wants to talk about the Marketplace Fairness Act is something that I also support. That is something that, that came out of the Senate a while back that my state's been working on for several years. But the thing I would point out about this particular item is that it's got a sense of urgency about it because this does expire in November. Mr. Chairman, I want to call up Thune Amendment number 2, which is Committee Amendment number 75. And what this does is it proposes a 5-year phase out of the Section 45 production tax credit as it relates to electricity from wind. The Chairman's modified mark does include the 2-year extension of the wind PTC that expired at the end of last year, which I support. But I intend to withdraw this amendment, but I'm offering it because I think it's time that we have an earnest conversation about the wind PTC going forward and what we intend to do. And I would point out that it has been very successful since father or grandfather Grassley authored this back in 1992. We have now the wind that's being generated in this country, 35% of it in the last year of all new power capacity, I should say in the last 5 years, has been from wind. And in my state of South Dakota, we rank only second to Iowa. 26% of our electricity generated is from wind energy. And according to the American Wind Energy Association, there are over 550 U.S. facilities that manufacture for the wind industry in this country. An average annual private investment in wind has been about $18 billion annually over the past 5 years. So it's not a nascent industry. It is maturing. It's generating billions of dollars in revenue and powering the equivalent of more than 15 million American homes, which is something that we ought to celebrate, but I think we also have to ask the question of how long a federal subsidy is necessary and how do we begin the transition away from more than 2 decades of taxpayer support. When we considered this in August of 2012, a 2-year extension of the PTC was the second largest business tax extender at about $12 billion. This time around it's $13 billion. We know that's only going to grow as we move forward. And so my view on this is fairly straightforward, and that is rather than seeing this subsidy end abruptly due to cost concerns, as we've seen with past renewable energy credits, let's come up with a predictable and sensible phase-out plan that provides more certainty to wind developers and utilities with a better value for the taxpayer. So this amendment is a 5-year phase-out going from 100% of the credit in 2014 and reducing every year by 10% down to 60% in 2018, and that it would expire for projects thereafter. The approach is similar, not exact, but similar to the 6-year phase-out that the wind industry has acknowledged would sustain a viable industry capable of continued cost reductions in the price of wind energy. And the amendment also freezes the inflation update to the credit for new projects, but it doesn't negatively impact those projects that have already been placed in service. So, Mr. Chairman, the amendment affects only industry or only energy generated from wind. It doesn't affect other sources, but wind is about 90% of that credit. And the 5-year phase-out approach was estimated last October when we submitted it to the Joint Tax Committee at about $6 billion, which is less than actually half of the cost of the 2-year extension that we're talking about today. So this amendment does stretch beyond the 2-year scope of this markup. I know it's non-germane. I acknowledge that it's a multi-year phase-out is more appropriate for tax reform or for a comprehensive energy bill, but I wanted to raise the issue. I hope we can start this discussion about how we transition away from perpetual federal subsidies, both for wind and for other energy technologies that are no longer in need of subsidies or special tax breaks. The wind energy industry does deserve certainty. I think it's important that we get away from this on-again, off-again, 1-year, 2-year retroactive extension of expired credit, and I think it's important for the American taxpayers that they deserve to know that they're not going to be on the hook for a multi-billion-dollar tax credit forever as well. So, Mr. Chairman, I offer this, I withdraw it, but hope that we can begin a serious discussion about how we create a phase-out glide path that allows for a transition away from this, what has become a very sizable subsidy. Mr. Chairman, I yield back. Finally, just one observation. I mean, this has not been historically, traditionally part of the tax extenders package. This is an add-on. It's normally been done in the context of trade adjustment assistance, which typically goes along with trade promotion authority. And I would just say that if we were moving trade bills and trade promotion authority like we should be, that would be a very appropriate way to address this too. And I just want to point out that I think it's really important for our economy and for our country to get trade promotion authority going, and then all these other things that go with it would have been necessarily followed from that. The reason I think we're doing this today is because on this particular piece of legislation is because we have been slow and reluctant and resistant to moving the trade bill.